warm welcome to episode 68 of my Doll's House Diary. Now in today's episode I'm going to be back in the guest bedroom and continuing with the accessories. So let's get started. So I'm going to start off today where I finished in the last episode, and I want to make a little shaving mirror to sit at the back of this chest of drawers. Okay, so this is going to be a really easy little make. Now I haven't given a cutting list for this because again, this is one of those pieces that really you can make in any size you like. And I haven't got a very large area at the back there to stand it, so I'm making mine quite small. So this piece is the base, and this is just over 1/2 inch or 12 millimeters square, and that will sit there like that, probably at a bit of an angle. So you can see I've just cut it just large enough to sit on there behind my towels and toiletry bags. And then for the actual mirror part, I've just gone a little bit wider at each side, so probably about 1 millimeter wider at each side. And then I've done that 19 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch high. But again, as I say, if you wanted a larger mirror, then you could make that bit a little bit larger. And then for the actual stem to join the mirror to the base, I'm using a cocktail stick. And we're going to begin by trimming that. So cut off the pointed end of the cocktail stick, and we are going to cut an angle in it so that our mirror can sit at a bit of an angle, but we'll do that separately. I don't just want to sit it along the point of the cocktail stick because it's not very sturdy. So it helps if you roll the cocktail stick along under your knife blade to get rid of that, and then just give it a good cut through like that. And then we're going to cut that 1 inch long, or 25 millimeters long. So just lay it alongside your rule like that. Make your mark, and then again you can cut away from your rule. Makes it a little bit easier. Like that. And then what we're going to do is cut an angle in one end. So just a very sort of shallow angle in the end there. We don't want the mirror sitting at too much of an angle. So I've just gone like that. And then if you imagine, we're going to glue that into the centre of the mirror. So that will be your angle. So don't cut it too harsh so the mirror is sort of facing upwards. You still want it to be facing forwards. Like that. We're then going to drill a hole in the centre of the base. So make a little central pencil mark in the centre of the base there, and then I've got a 2 millimeter bit here in my mini drill, and that's about the thickness of your cocktail stick. So drill your hole. Make sure you're all the way through there. And then sand away the little bits of wood that have been pushed out. And then what we're going to do is just create a slight bevel around the top edge of the base. So just go along at a 45-degree angle like that. Just tidy up those edges. And just by creating those slightly beveled edges in a piece, that can make all the difference to the overall look, just by taking away any sort of sharp edges. Okay, so apply a little bit of glue into the drilled hole. And then attach the cocktail stick so that your beveled edge is running parallel to a straight edge of the base. And that's obviously just because we want the mirror to be sitting straight on there, like that, with an edge of the base and not sort of at an angle like that. So make sure the cocktail stick is all the way in and flat at the bottom of the base there. Give them both a press against your work surface. And that piece can then be left to dry. Okay, so to actually paint the mirror, I was going to use my Humbrol enamel, and I got a metallic one, which is metallic 56, and it's supposed to be quite a nice bright silver, but I've just sort of given it a really good stir and it's still coming out quite matte grey. So what I am actually going to use is this silver permanent marker, and I actually use this for the lid of the little tin of hair wax in there and for the lid of the deodorant. And it's got a really nice shine to it. So you need to give it a really good shake. And then I'm just going to begin by actually just dotting it around the base. And it does actually go on better if you do dot it on rather than, you know, going along like that. Otherwise you're sort of just dragging it off again and making streaks in it. So I'm just going around the edge of the base, and then I'll pop this onto the masking tape and do the rest. Make sure you're covering all of that natural wood. So I'll just let that dry off for a moment. Actually, I might as well stick it to my tape now because it doesn't really matter about the bottom part there. And then do around the edges of the mirror, and then we'll do just the back of the mirror, and obviously the front we're going to be covering with our mirror vinyl. And if you find that the actual ink on the pen is drying up, just give it a dab like that and then continue. And I think this is actually quite an old pen, so there's probably not a lot of ink left in it. Otherwise it would probably be a little bit more liquidy. Okay, so I'm going to pop that onto the tape as well. I'm going to start with the mirror just because it's easier. Nice flat surface. I think I'm definitely going to order another one of these. I'm just blending that in a bit, just because these are really good things to have, and obviously a lot easier to use than the paints because you need to stir them for quite a while just to get them to, you know, the correct consistency. Now, I know I said about brushing it, but if it's nice and wet then you can do that, but if it's quite dry then you're better off just sort of dotting it on. And that's quite a nice finish on there. A little bit more on those sides. Like that. And then I'm going to do the sort of mirror stem first. And then just because we've got quite a thick pen nib, we're not going to be able to get into that little bit around the bottom there, so I'm going to use a separate brush. I'll get this done first. So around the base of the stem, just get some ink out like that, and then just use a tiny brush to get in there, brush that on. Just where you can't get with the nib, but actually it's putting it on a little bit more nicely than the nib, so I might do it that way, just on the base. And I'm getting that really nice sort of metallic shine that I wanted. Let's get a little bit more out. But see what I mean about when it dries up, all you're doing is sort of putting it on and then dragging it off and getting a grey rather than a metallic colour. So make sure all of the wood is covered. This won't take long to dry, but I will just leave it for 5 or 10 minutes or so just to make sure, and then I can actually just very gently sand and get rid of any of these little rough areas. Okay, so for the mirror I'm actually using this self-adhesive vinyl mirror sheet, and I think you may have seen me use this in a few other projects before, certainly a couple over on Patreon that I've done, I've used this. and it's really handy for creating mirrors and much easier to cut than the sort of thicker mirrored sheet that you can buy. So I've cut a piece here slightly larger than my mirror, and then I can trim around it. So just take off the self-adhesive backing like that, and then place the mirror down in the centre. And it's just easier to trim around it than try and get an exact fit beforehand. Like that, and then you can trim around with your knife. So just cut as close to the edge of your mirror as you can. And I've got a fairly new blade in here. I've still got a bit of the silver ink on my fingers, that's what's coming off. The actual wood is actually dry. Okay, like that. So leave the protective film in place for now. Okay, so we're now ready to attach the base to the mirror, and I've made a couple of these just to have a little practice run, and I found the glue will adhere better if you actually just scrape away a little bit of the silver ink on the little slant that we cut in the cocktail stick. So apply a little bit of glue. And then I've also got here a little bit of masking tape, and we're just going to put that across the stem of the mirror just to really hold it in place. And you can actually leave that there as well if the back of your mirror isn't going to be seen. So I've just made a little pencil mark in the centre, close to the top there. So position the stem there. And you want to make sure that you've got that square to the actual mirror so that the bottom of the mirror and the base are running in alignment. So just press that down, and then I'm just going to put that little bit of tape across. Back there like that. Give that a good press. And then you can just stand it up and make sure that you're happy that the mirror is in the right place and that you've got a nice tilt there as well. And then you can remove the protective film from the mirror. Like that. So let's pop this in place. Okay, so that's going to be sitting just at the back there. Again, at a bit of an angle so we can see it nicely from the front of the doll's house. I think that looks quite good. Okay, so I'm going to go and put this back into place for now. So there's the little chest back in place. I think that looks really good there. So what I actually want to do now is dress the little shopping bag. So let's take that back into the craft room. Okay, so when I'm dressing a shopping bag, I really like to have a think about what I would actually buy on a really nice shopping day, looking around old shops and markets and things like that, and just choose a few of my favourite things to display poking out of the bag. So I've got here a couple of pieces that I made quite a while ago, and it's just a couple of books. So really simple, just the covers wrapped around a piece of wood, which I've painted gold along the edges. So I've got here the Shell Seekers and Elizabeth Jane Howard's The Light Years. So I'll pop those in. And then what I've just actually done is scan a few of my old magazine covers. So I've got Doll's House Projects there and Doll's House World. And actually this Doll's House World, although you can't see it on this image, is from 2008. I can't believe I've had that magazine in there for so long. And then what I've also got here is a copy of Arrow Words, and I'm actually really addicted to doing these, so I've just scanned that in as well, and we'll have that poking out of the bag as well. Now I always do 2 of each just in case you make a mistake and then you haven't got to reprint it, but what I can actually do with these Doll's House magazines is use them in my craft room. Okay, so I started by adding a piece of clear tape to the cover just to give it that nice sort of glossy magazine look. And then you want to cut a strip of paper that is as high as your cover, and then just lay the cover on there like that, and then just trim those to size and go all the way along. So just use small dots of glue to stick your pages together. Straighten those up and then stick them into your cover. Fold in half, crease nice and firmly along the spine there, and then use your scissors or your knife just to trim around. Like that. So I've got one of each there for my bag, and I'm going to put these 2 Doll's House magazines in my craft room. Okay, so what I've also got here, which I found in my box of miniatures, is this wine bottle. Now it hasn't got a label on it, but that doesn't really matter because that's going to be hidden inside the bag anyway. But what I am going to do, just to make it look a little bit more fancy, is put a gold foil top on it. So I've just got a circle of gold foil here, which came from a chocolate wrapper, a lot larger than I need it, but I'm going to stick that on top of the bottle and then shape it around. Just sort of pleat it around the bottle top like that. And I'll be trimming a bit of this off. So once you've shaped it around, just sort of flare up the bottom into a sort of skirt, and then you can just trim a little bit off. And keep that level all the way around. And then I just want to wrap a bit of this thin copper wire around. I don't even know if the camera is actually picking that up, but it's just very, very thin and very easy to work with. So just start by wrapping that around a paintbrush like that, or the bottom of a paintbrush, just to get the basic shape there, and then you can slot that on like that. So I've doubled that round, so I can now twist that together to secure that on there, and then trim it off. And then I'm just going to trim that off with my pliers like that, and just flatten that down. That just adds an extra little bit of detail. So there's that. And then what I've got here is a little bit of brown paper, actually from an old brown paper bag, and I'm just going to fold that into a small bag. I'm going to twist the top over. I'm going to make it quite small, obviously, because it's a smaller bag this time, smaller shopping bag. Just sort of fold it into thirds like that, glue it down, and then fold up a flap at the bottom and glue that down. And you can put things in these if you like, have things sort of coming out of the top as well, or you can just make them look like a little filled bag and twist the top over. I'm actually going to put just a little bit of an offcut of the bag in there, just to add a little bit of fullness in there. But let's get another little bit as well. Make it look a little bit fatter. Of course you can put anything in them, pieces of tissue, anything. I'm thinking she's probably got some balls of wool or something in there. And then you can glue that down as well. And then finally what I've got here is a little bar of Dairy Milk Fruit and Nut, one of my favourites. I just printed off a full label like that, covered a piece of thin wood in some tin foil and then glued the label around, so it's super easy and I think they look really nice. Now nowadays these bars come with sort of, you know, just serrated ends. You don't get them in the foil anymore, I don't think. But I like the sort of old school look of those, so I've done it that way. And I think that's all I'm going to have in the bag, just because it is a slightly smaller shopping bag, as I say. I'm just going to start by folding up a quarter of a sheet of kitchen towel, just to put in the bottom. And I always like to start that way, because then it gives you a bit of a base, and not everything's just going to be hidden in the bottom of your bag. I'm going to push that over to the side because I know my wine bottle will take up quite a bit of room, so that will go to the bottom of the bag like that. I want that facing there so you can see the wire from the front of the bag. So what I'm actually going to do is just put a bit of glue on the front of there, so that it will hold that angle like that. Press that in there, and then I want the books at the other end just sort of a little bit staggered like that, so you can see all of the titles. Now I'm not going to be able to glue those now I've put the tape on, but I'm just going to use a piece of tacky wax just to hold them in that nice sort of fanned position. I'm just going to put a piece on there and have that one like that. I might just glue these shut as well. Give those a good press. More tacky wax on there, and have that one like that, and then they can go in over that other side, and that creates a really nice backdrop as well then. So I think I'll just put a bit of tacky wax on the back again and then stick those to the bag like that. I've then got my other two little books again, which I want to have staggered like that. These I can put a bit of glue on. Might just have maybe the little bag in there first and then these books in front, and that will just break it up a little bit. Because that was dropping, I'm going to put another little bit of kitchen towel in. And this is what you're doing then, you're just sort of building it up bit by bit. That keeps sort of standing up straight, but it doesn't really matter, that might just stand straight in there. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the back of the bag. Just have that sit in there. Don't need too much of that poking out. And the little books. I can go there like that. The battery's just about to go, so I'll just change that and then put the chocolate in. Okay, so I've decided I need something else in this little gap here. So I'm going to put these flowers in. Now, I wasn't going to use flowers just because I thought if you were away on holiday you probably wouldn't treat yourself to some flowers, but she could have bought these for her host and hasn't yet given them to her, so I'm going to use these. I always like to sort of have a little story or make up a reason for things being in there. So I'm just going to have those in that little gap there. I think that looks really nice actually. And then you can sort of shape the roses around. When they're on the wire, they're really easy to shape and position. Yeah, I really like that, and that just fills out that space. Oh, not the camera then. But obviously it's up to you how full you have your bag. You might just want a couple of things in there, or just a bunch of flowers or something like that. I like to do them quite full, and I really enjoy doing them because it's fun choosing what you're going to have in there. So the final little thing then will be my little bar of chocolate, which I'm just going to squeeze in down there. I think that looks really good. So I'll put a little bit of glue on there and just fix that to the front of the bag, but I think the flowers are fine. They'll hold themselves nicely in there. Okay, so let's go and pop this back in as well. So I'm going to stand that there for now, but as the room fills up with miniatures, I may change the position of that and have it over this side of the room. But really pleased with that. And I forgot to mention this, you may have spotted it, this lovely little alarm clock. I'll just pop it there so I can show you a little bit closer. I really like that. I think the scale's really nice. And I think it goes well in this room. And I sell these in my Etsy shop. So I just wanted to update you as well on a couple of other things I'm working on for the room. So a couple of blankets, one knitted, one crocheted, and actually they've both turned into a bit of a disaster. So with the crochet blanket, because I left the wool as a skein, you can see how sort of knotted and tangled it is, and I was forever having to stop to unknot it. So I'm actually just winding that into a ball, and then I'll start again with that. And then with this one, I did a few wrong stitches. So instead of knit, I did some pearls, and I had like a little ridge in the blanket. So I tried to unpick my mistake, and then when I started again, I looked back and I'd got quite a few holes in it. So I thought it's going to be better just to start the whole thing again. So I started again, and I've done less stitches. Last time I went sort of all the way along the needle, but this is just actually going to be a little folded blanket to go on top of the wardrobe, so it doesn't have to be, you know, too big. So I've started again with that, and as you can see, haven't really got very far with it, so I'll carry on with those. Now I also wanted to make a couple of lamps in this episode, but if I want to get it on today, I'm not going to have time to do that, and I really want to keep the Friday videos going, so I'll end it here for today, but I will do this in the next episode. So I've got these lovely sort of plastic vases here, and I thought they would make really nice lamp shade bases. So then what I'll do is just use this piece of silver metal or rod for the actual lamp base, and then remake the lamps to go on top of there. So last time I made these sort of very plain, just lamps out of the teal silk fabric that I had. So I'll remake those, and they'll sit on top of there. And I think that will look really nice. Obviously quite difficult to show you like this, but that will sort of sit on top of the rod like that. I'll work out a way of fixing that on there. But we'll do that in the next episode, like I say. Otherwise I'm not going to have time to finish editing and then upload this for today. Okay, so that's it for today's episode, and I really hope you've enjoyed it. I'm really pleased with how the guest bedroom is looking. There are still a couple of bits and pieces I'd like to do in there, and obviously I'll cover those in a future episode. Now, I know I say this in every episode, but please, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so, as it really does help people to find my videos. And for those of you who don't know, I also have a Patreon channel where I share 3 new videos every month on the 1st, 10th and the 20th. You can join from as little as £1, $1 or €1 a month, and if you sign up for a whole year, you'll get a 10% discount off of your membership fee. So I do hope you'll consider coming over there and having a look. There are hundreds of videos already on the channel, and as soon as you join, you unlock them all. A huge thank you to my existing patrons, my little bitsers, who make everything I do here on the channel possible. So thank you so much for that. And I'm going to go now and let you get on with your day, and I'll see you again soon. So take care. Bye.